let them set the tone, you set the tone, you make the rules, say no, don't take it on the swing, go swing, go play in the dirt.
I think that's one thing that I feel strongly about, that they shouldn't be allowed outside, because so many different things.
And I just want to, and I completely understand where you're coming from. However, we have students, let's say for example, a student with extreme special needs who has a device and it requires touch.
That's IEP, I'm sorry.
That's communication.
Because how is it educational outside of that instance? How is it educational when they go out on recess? And if you really can think of something.
A student listening to music or that has, I mean, I think we need to be, I understand though.
Those have been, kids that have special needs, that have accommodations, modifications, those have been in place to begin with. So that it's easy to get around that. You just, I mean, that should be explained anyways. Kids in the class should understand what that device is for, you know?
Right. And
that's not a part of this initiative.
I think at the same, I think at the same time, I think, kids are going to want to play. If the teacher, I would think, especially at, you know, the lower elementary school, they're probably not going to be allowed to bring them out to recess. But you've had your hand up high.
So, all right, so I want to start out by saying I genuinely appreciate everything the school district is doing to bring technology into the classrooms. I share every concern that I've heard in this room. And to Dr. Littlefield's point, this is a partnership, and this is a choice that I'm making for my child.
Absolutely.
Help me understand how I can opt my child out of this social experiment.
How can, you don't have to send them with any sort of a device.
Nope, okay, so she's going to send her child with a device. Now, she's my neighbor, and I know she's not planning on doing that. She sends in one of her child with a device. My child is now in that experiment because my child plays with her child at recess every day. My child is in her child's classroom. How do I opt my child out of that experiment? I don't want my second grader, my fourth grader, my fifth grader, my sixth grader. I see complete value in bringing your laptop at an age level where you take notes, where you need to do those types of activities. I don't understand how my second grader needs to be doing that. And I don't understand how I get them to not be exposed to this.
I feel totally compelled to interrupt and say, I feel like throughout the course of the night, comments like that, I kind of feel like I always have the same answer. It's not really any different, I feel like, with kids bringing in their iPads or whatever, than when we were in school and kids had like trapper keepers. I didn't have a trapper keeper because my parents couldn't afford it.
You couldn't play Angry Birds in your trapper keeper.
No.
You didn't take a trapper keeper.
Well, hold on a
No,
second.
but they're not. We're not talking about them sitting in class and playing Angry Birds. We're talking about them, you know, like I have a sixth grader, so it's a little bit different, definitely, than a second grader. But we're talking about them using them in more of an educational way, not playing Angry Birds. So I feel like it's not, socially, it's kind of the same thing as, it is growing up for everyone. Everyone has something different that their peers always want and they can't always have. So I don't think, I don't want to be offensive and say I don't hold value in that, but really I don't feel like it's any different with a piece of technology than it is with any, you know, with someone wearing Nikes versus someone who has sneakers from a lower end store.
So I didn't bring up the economic divide.
No, I'm not talking about economically.
The social dynamics and the interactions and the educational time and the classroom disruption that's going to happen. And as soon as that child is looking up what is the Civil War, that child is completely checked out of that lecture.
But see, what you would see as being as an interruption, is that an interruption really for everybody else? If they're learning that way? If they can look it up and, you know, so I think we need to think about this a little differently. So they're in the classroom and a student feels comfortable looking up the answer, they're, you know, doing the same activity. I think if the student has a device and they can find the answer, first of all, the question is why is the teacher just giving them those facts? You know, if they have access to find the information. So is it part of an activity? I guess there's two sides to it.
So my pushback to that would be, what about my child who won't raise her hand and doesn't know the answer?
There might be something like a forum that, for example, like we set up here, that you can post a question. If you didn't have an opportunity to ask a question, or they're not comfortable asking a question in class, we might have somebody at the middle school level who's just not comfortable asking that in class, but they are comfortable typing in the question.
So I agree, and I said there are grade levels where I think it is appropriate for them to be bringing their own
Sure.
devices. I don't think second grade is inappropriate.
And I think your opinion is important.
So how do I opt my child out of this pilot? That's what I want to know. Do I have to move to Derry, who isn't doing it?
Well, and I think that, you know.
Do I have to homeschool? Because that's really not a choice for me.
I think you can pivot though, and you can say that, you know, how do you opt your child out? Or you could say, how do I opt everybody else's child out? Right?
No, I'm not asking to opt your child out.
Well, it kind of feels like that, because the only way it seems to opt your child out is for there not to be a program, right?
I'm not asking
Maybe
there
if
not
it's
to
more
be a program.
controlled with a curriculum, to say, look, you know,
Well,
it's 2:15,
talk-
everybody take your
But when you say
device out.
curriculum, that's very vague.
Okay, my niece hates math. I hate math. My niece hates math. We both hate math. We got her an iPad. She loves math now because she uses Mathboard. The best device in the world is the only thing that got her to add. Perfect example of what you can do in a classroom. Do that, please do that. Because my son may study his spelling words.
Right.
He may like to read. You know, you give him
But
the
I think that's
the
what we're
iPad.
talking about, isn't it? With a pilot program?
If
Tell me
it's-
how that's not
If
what.
it's controlled, and if it's in the classroom, and everybody's given the same device where everybody can be in a controlled curriculum that you can bring metrics out of, and you can say, this is what you learned on your device, take the test, look at the scores.
And they're all
You
doing the
did
same
learn.
thing at the same time.
And they're all doing the same thing. And
Yeah.
even if you've got to give the kids that are
Yeah.
super extra, super smart, give them a different app. Give them the next level up.
But
But
they may-
control it somehow.
But if they
I
have
mean,
a
they may
device,
be doing
then
the
you have
same.
the option to do that.
They may be doing the same math board
Mhm.
app, but one's
Right.
doing multiplication, the other one's doing division, the other one's doing,
Yeah.
you know, linear algebra, whatever.
Second grade?
Difficult, maybe in second grade. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I think there are a lot of people here that
Yeah.
love the whole concept, love the idea of
Sure.
21st century learning,
Right.
but it almost feels like, you know, you're flicking a switch and saying, well, let's see what happens.
Right.
And I think people would be more behind it if there was just maybe a little bit, you know, more rules, maybe a little clearer idea of how these things are going to be used. It almost seems like it's going to be not quite chaos, but you know, some people are going to be using it, some people aren't. Some people are going to be taking it out to recess, some people aren't. Some people are going to be tweeting and texting. Other people aren't.
I think it's hard to say though over a course. I mean, it's 3 different schools. You know, one person has a 2nd grader. I have a 6th grader. You know, obviously, like, I probably in 2nd grade wouldn't have sent them to school with any type of device. But I think that this is understanding that this is just a general overall initiative meeting. So it's not specific for each school. There's going to be
That's right.
obviously different guidelines to affect all of our
and I
different
think
age
things
children differently.
develop as the pilot, and that's why it's a pilot.
But one of the things that you were saying is it can look different in every school. I kind of have a feeling that it could also look different in each classroom, based on
Absolutely.
how the teacher
Yeah.
wants it rolled out, how the teacher is comfortable with it or not. So I think that you have to put that out there, that it could look different in an individual classroom too, based on the type of students that are in that classroom, the teacher's comfortable.
Absolutely.
So I think that's important to say. I have a 2nd grader, and he could be doing one thing with it in his room, and next door, he could be having a time where the teacher's saying, no, it's not used right now.
Right. Absolutely.
So it really is individualized, not building specific.
Good point. Yes.
Matt, I think a lot of the people in this room, including myself, still we're all alluding to the same question. What is the basic format? The school bell rings, and Johnny and Jane and Mary are all sitting in the classroom. What happens? So does the teacher say, those of you who don't have devices, please turn to page 242. Those of you with devices, please turn to the browser, 242 silverwar.com.
So they're all doing the same thing at the same time.
That's what I'm asking. It seems to me you're building in stricter competition here, where Dr. Littlefield's point about what happens if the South won the Civil War, and Johnny zaps up in 2 seconds flat on the internet, but her child is lost in the system here. I thought the teachers were supposed to bring everybody up in the classroom and not create strict competition between everybody. Is that what the 21st century means? That whoever gets a device gets a step up within that same classroom?
I think
Could you please describe the basic format of a classroom in the 21st century when the school bell rings?
Day in the life.
Day in the life. What happens? School bell rings, teacher says what?
When you think about classrooms the way they were when you were in middle school, I'm taking it that class desks were in rows, kids were learning the same thing at the very same time. Is that
Not necessily, but isn't that...
okay.
Start from where we are now.
What were the tools?
Start where we are now, yeah.
What were
Right
the
now.
tools that
What's
they
it-
were
We're all
using?
wondering what this is going to, how this is going to conceptualize in the classroom on October 17th. What's it going to look like?
Experiment on our second graders for a whole year. That is what it comes down to. Our kids aren't to experiment on, they're to teach.
And I think they learn better, they learn more. Other schools, look at Bow High School. Our kids come from Collie and go to Bow High School, and they have a hard time because their kids have computers in the classrooms in their school.
So how is it used at Bow? What's a day in the life at Bow?
But can we then look at how they use computers in Bud?
The kids
Before we do something?
Our kids have a hard time when they go to Bow High School. They tell you when you walk in there, you stop any Hooksett student saying, how do you like the school? I did it last week. The kid said, it's an amazing school, they have all kinds of programs, tons of stuff to do, but it's hard here because they've had all this stuff the whole time and we haven't.
Well, what is your son doing with his iPad right now?
He's playing the game, he's not in school. He's,
Well, what's wrong with that?
What's
Yeah,
to keep him from pulling that out and distracting another 3-4 kids behind him with Angry Birds?
well, I don't anticipate he's going to play Angry Birds during school.
Is the teacher going to be in charge of going around and controlling that? How do they know that they're doing research versus playing Angry Birds? This sounds awesome.
If I could just allude to that, because that's one of the things, that becomes classroom management. And that teacher working the classroom the same way they would if they were, giving notes, doing a lab. I came out of a middle school science class before I came to Hooksett. And, there were students doing a lab prior to the technology, what have you, that they were off task doing the lab unless they were being monitored. So I think this is just another tool that, yes, they're available in the classroom, and yes, there are a ton of questions that we have and a lot of answers that we don't have yet because we've got to go through this pilot. But when I think about my classroom, when I was, teaching and with the lab going on, you have to monitor what's going on in the room, whether it's technology-based.
You got to admit, though, it's a lot easier to do that in a lab form where everyone is expected to kind of follow the same material versus when anybody can just get out a device at any time and you're not really sure what they're doing.